Mr. Greatwell Holland.
Mr. Speaker, Charles Kennedy was one of those people that you remembered meeting for the first time. His distinctive look, his very attractive Highland accent, his unusual and warm manner as a politician. And I remember meeting him very excitedly as a new prospective parliamentary candidate, and was touched how genuine this great figure of liberalism that I was finally getting to meet actually was. And he wanted to know how I was and how things were going in Leeds. And I was very lucky during the 2005 election campaign to have not one but two visits from Charles. The first was to an older people's residence, Tealbeck Court and Tealbeck House in Otley. The second was a rally towards the end of the campaign at Headingley Stadium, when it appeared that I might make the breakthrough for the Liberal Democrats in Leeds. On both occasions, Charles lit up the room when he walked in. At the rally, he inspired people to go out and do that bit more over the last 24 hours to win the seat. But it was the ordinary people, not the party activists, who were particularly touched by Charles and by his natural style and the way that he engaged so humbly with the older residents, with the hard-working care staff at the home and people at the rugby and cricket ground. And everyone commented, "Isn't he such a nice bloke?" And they were surprised that a party leader could be such. I'm very proud that I was elected in 2005 with Charles Kennedy as a great leader of my party, the Liberal Democrats, in what was the best ever result for the Liberal Democrats, something that we will not forget. And I was doubly overjoyed when Charles became a new father, with the joyous news, albeit rather inconveniently timed, of Donald's birth in the general election campaign. And a few months later, I had my own first child, my daughter Isabel, and Charles and I would meet and chat, and sometimes a little tired from having been up, would talk new father talk about how we were getting on. And Charles always asked and always cared. He was a truly genuine, warm and humble man, and he always asked how you were and how your family was before he got into politics. My sincere condolences go to his family and his friends and all who knew him. You are in our thoughts and our prayers at this difficult time, and as has already been expressed, I just hope that the genuine outflowing of tributes to Charles is some comfort at this very difficult time. But as one of the 8 Liberal Democrat members of Parliament, rather than 62 in 2005, we now have the job to restore the Liberal Democrats to where Charles took us to in 2005. That is what Charles would have wanted, and that is what we will work and strive to do.
Mr. Stephen Pound.
Mr. Speaker, many hearts broke, I think, yesterday morning when we heard the news. It came as such a dreadful shock. It is equally heartbreaking, I would suggest, that Charles Kennedy, our friend, our fellow parliamentarian, cannot be aware of this great outpouring of affection that has swept up across the whole nation, and in fact wider than the shores of these islands. I think maybe we could have done more to help and support Charles, and to let him know how loved he was, because it may be too late now, but it will be comfort to the family for them to know that this was a man who was loved and adored right the way across the political spectrum, across the national spectrum, across the world. Certainly all those who came into contact with him grew to love him and to hold him in great affection. And I think we should perhaps cherish those who are with us now and never forget that we do actually owe that support and friendship. But I have to say, Charles Kennedy set the industry standard for humour and wit in politics for many years, and I have to say this was rather distressing to some people who aspired to the foothills of that great Ben Nevis of wit that was Charles Kennedy. For many years, he and Austin Mitchell and Julian Critchley enlivened the airways with a three-way commentary on current affairs. They were known as Mitch, Critch and Titch, which I don't think is unfair. Mitch, obviously, for Austin Mitchell, Critch for Julian Critchley, but Titch for Charles Kennedy. No, he was a fine figure of a man, in every sense. He was a great, great figure of a man. And my memory, not just of him, absolutely creasing the sides of the nation until our ribs ached with the humour, not just on the radio, not just on television, and as, if I may say, comment to the earlier remark that was made about have I got news for you, that you had to either be prepared to be a Pratt or Charles Kennedy. I appeared on Have I Got News for You. Demonstrably, I'm not Charles Kennedy. But there was another side to him. He was a man of very great and deep faith, who drew great strength from the well of that faith. And some people in this house, some people in the chamber today will know that on Wednesday evenings, when we celebrate Mass here in the Undercroft, he would be there, very quietly, very much in the background. I appreciate it as a Roman Catholic tradition that we tend to stand at the back of the church in case there's a collection. But Charles would be there, very, very quietly, just worshipping, communing with his God. And he drew such strength from him. And I hope you'll forgive me, Mr. Speaker, for pointing out that tonight Mass will be celebrated for the repose of his soul and for the comfort of his family in the Undercroft Chapel. Charles Kennedy, even the words, actually must give us pause to realise how much we've lost, but how blessed we were to have known this great man. Charles Kennedy, may light eternal shine upon him, and may he rest in peace.
Mr. Mark Williams.
It may be too sentimental to describe political parties, some big, some perhaps rather too small these days, as families. We could describe this house as a family perhaps today too. And today this family is mourning one of its finest sons. But more than that, much more important than that, our thoughts must first and foremostly be with the Kennedy family, as all honourable members have said throughout this very moving set of tributes to a great man. Like my friend from Leeds North West, I was immensely proud to have been elected in 2005 under the leadership of Charles Kennedy. I was proud to have been one of his foot soldiers. And he's reflecting back, I think back to the time when he ceased to be our leader. It was a particularly harrowing time. In later years, some of us still look to Charles as a leader of our particular brand of Celtic liberalism. And winning when I did in 2005 by just 219 votes, I've often reflected on what the determining factor for that was. And I've no doubt it was his principled and brave stand on Iraq, which did it. And when I once attributed my win to him, with characteristic modesty, humility and generosity, he told me I was talking utter nonsense. But I was right. His leadership at that time of our party was engaging, it was inclusive, it was inspirational. And so too, we mustn't forget, were some of those, perhaps not as often as we like, appearances in this chamber in recent years. I can still think of the doors opening, Charles arriving to sit down there in the corner, one of those very flashlight suits, glasses perched on the end of his nose. You knew you were in for a treat. You knew Charles Kennedy was going to say something of significance and importance. And how good it was to rush home, sometimes on a Thursday night, to make sure you were there in time for Charles Kennedy on question time. Charles, the great communicator. Charles, with his great capacity, as everyone said, to put everyone at ease, whether they were the nervous, new, unexpected MP, as he had been in 1983, and many of us were subsequently, putting people at ease, everyone of every walk of life. And when he came to Wales, whether it was meeting students or health managers or my party activists in Ceredigion, whether it was taking him to meet farmers in the Martin Newcastle Emlyn, or by-election canvassing in Tredegar, in Blaenau Gwent. He had the same effectiveness with people. Now, those of you who know your psephology know there aren't many Liberals in Blaenau Gwent, there aren't many Liberals in Tredegar, but it didn't matter. Charles Kennedy, knocking on doors, was enjoying meeting people, and he left an impression on them which would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Charles Kennedy, dignified, compassionate, principled, honest, and yet somehow vulnerable. Above all else, yes, as we've said before, others have said, a fully signed-up member of the human race, a rare breed, a politician who was universally liked, if not loved.
Diane Abbott.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to be able to pay tribute to Charles Kennedy. As we've heard, he was a politician with all the talents. But as one of the members of Parliament who was here at the time of the Iraq War, was one of the small group of Labour MPs that voted against the Iraq War, I would remind the House of this, that it wasn't just remarkable that Charles Kennedy was the one-party leader that took a position, the correct position, against the Iraq War. Those of us that were opposed to the war from the beginning were very worried that in the end Charles Kennedy would not have been able to lead his MP through the lobbies because he was under pressure within his own party, and you cannot understate the judgment and the courage he showed. I remember we had the biggest rally in London ever against the war, and I remember him on the platform addressing the crowd, and I remember how excited and happy they were to hear him speak. And I will say this, his position on the Iraq War was the right position for him, it was the right position for his party because he led them to their greatest ever victory, but it was also the right position for Westminster politics because the public likes nothing better than to see a politician stand on principle, and he exemplified that. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I would say this. You know, sometimes the people that pay the price for the personal ambitions of members of Parliament are our families and our children. And I would like the message to go out to his son that he should never cease to be proud of his father, the best of the political class and the best of men.
I thank all colleagues for what they've said and for the way in which they've said it. We must, I'm sure, all hope that the warmth of the sentiments expressed and the demonstrable unity of this House on this occasion will offer some, even if modest, comfort and succour to the family in the harrowing period that lies ahead. Order.